Welcome to my channel. My name is Greg, and today I'm going to be sharing my first time experience using the GoPro Hero 5 Black alongside the feiyu-tech WG2 wearable gimbal. To give you some context on my overall mountain biking experience, I've only been riding mountain bikes for a couple months now, but I do have 3 years experience working as a bike mechanic, and I've ridden BMX in the past as well. Now, neither the GoPro nor the gimbal came new when I bought them. Instead, I managed to find them both together in an eBay listing for fairly cheap. Because of this, I did not get all the extras that may have come with either one, only the items such as the charging cables, the GoPro battery, etc. Other than that, both seem to be in great condition, and the fact that they're both used hasn't really affected either in terms of functionality. I have never used any of the GoPro models or a gimbal in the past, so this will be a first time user's experience of them both. So, let's get into it. To start off, let's talk a little bit about the GoPro Hero 5 Black. Now, I won't go too into depth on all the different features and specifics, but I will go through the simple changes I made to get the GoPro set up for myself. The Hero 5 Black has the capability to do up to 4K resolution at 30 FPS, but for my own purposes, I simply have it set to record 1080p at 48 FPS. And if necessary, I could increase the FPS all the way up to 120 to get slow-mo shots, but for now I don't need that. Other than that, I have the color set to flat, and the white balance and ISO you can change depending on the environment you're filming in. I have the shutter speed set to auto, the EV set to 0, the sharpness set to medium, and the audio set to low. If you plan on using a gimbal like the feiyu-tech, make sure you set the audio to low, and I'll mention why that's important a little bit later. You can set the stabilization on or off depending on what you'd like. I have the low light setting off, and then on the manual controls page, you should set it to wind only mode. And again, this option will become more important later on. But that's about it with the setup, and if you'd like you can swipe down from the top and then go into preferences and change some other things in there, but I won't really be going over those settings in this video. So now, talking about the gimbal a little bit. The WG2 is a 3-axis gimbal. It recharges using micro USB, and it's fairly straightforward to set up. Make sure not to turn on the GoPro without the GoPro inserted, however, because the gimbal will have a straight up panic attack without the GoPro there for support. Once the GoPro is attached, you can hold down the power button to turn on the gimbal, and it will kind of maneuver itself into position. Then you can adjust the angle of elevation that the GoPro shoots at by simply rotating the motor and holding it in the position you want. After a second or two, you should feel a faint click and the GoPro will stay at the angle you set it to. Now, by default, the gimbal will be in follow mode, where it will turn as you turn. And for myself, I've left this in this mode for riding, because I think it works the best. And then lastly, I personally use a chest mount with a gimbal while riding, but you could certainly get creative with other types of mounts and uses for the gimbal. But that's probably enough about the specs and features of these items, so let's talk about how much they can cost, what my experience has been with using them, and whether I'd recommend this setup to other riders. Personally, I feel that the chest mount is the best option for mounting the gimbal, but I went ahead and bought a whole 20-pack of different GoPro accessories, which also included the chest mount. And in total, the GoPro, the gimbal, SD card, and other accessories together cost me about $277, which I'd say is definitely a good deal given that the GoPro Hero 5 Black new costs around $250 to $300 alone, and gimbals can range anywhere from $150 to $200, maybe even more. So I highly recommend that you take some time to shop around on eBay or even Craigslist if you're short on cash, because you can definitely find some good deals that way. Once getting everything set up, the chest mount only added some slight discomfort, and while wearing a pack, I often found myself forgetting that the GoPro and gimbal were even attached. I was amazed at the gimbal's ability to smooth out all small and big bumps on the trail, but still be able to capture a realistic POV experience. I will admit some of the ruggedness and the difficulty of the trails are lost, but until software stabilization catches up in quality, I think a GoPro and a gimbal is still one of the best options there is for smooth, clear footage. Listing out the positive qualities, there was the smooth footage, the fairly comfy setup, and it was similar to what a typical hydration pack already feels like. The battery life of the gimbal did not seem to come anywhere close to zero battery on my 2 to 3 hour 14-mile ride that I did. The simple gimbal and GoPro setup with plenty of tutorials out there shouldn't be any issue figuring out how to run these both. And then there was the fairly low cost, though for myself this is a slightly different story than what you might typically expect, but there are definitely good deals to be found in the used market. In terms of negatives, there was the battery life of the GoPro. I expected to get battery life from the GoPro to last a fairly short 14-mile ride, but the single GoPro battery only lasted about 90% of the ride. Next, there was the fact that having a gimbal and GoPro mounted to you while riding does put your money at risk. During a crash, either could get damaged, and you'll have to go out and buy a new one. I have heard, however, that the feiyu-tech gimbal is fairly durable, along with the GoPro of course, but the possibility is definitely always there. There's also the issue of space. The gimbal and chest mount and the GoPro all take up a fair amount of space, and if you already have a limited amount of space in your backpack, fitting them all could get difficult. And then lastly, while it did not in any way ruin my riding experience, I think that having to worry about recording and using the GoPro, having it mounted at the proper angle, getting the gimbal set up, and all that can take away from the overall riding experience. And it causes you to focus a lot more on the recording process and less on being in the moment and just enjoying nature. You can still have loads of fun while recording your ride, but there's definitely some value to riding gimbal and GoPro free, and just enjoying riding for the sake of riding. Overall, I personally think that the positives outweigh the negatives here, but I will let you decide that for yourself. Now, you may have noticed that during this video, I've really only shown the video of my ride and no audio. Now, this is actually because I forgot about the gimbal noise when recording my first ride. So here's a short clip from my ride which includes the original audio, and it should be apparent that there's some sort of high-pitched whine in the background that almost sounds like a mixture of a highway noise and some kind of electric whirring. So take a listen for yourself. No, you can just position it. Alright. Thankfully, fixing this issue was super simple. And if you were paying attention earlier in the video, I mentioned that there were some settings that would become important later on. And those two settings were to put the audio to low and setting the manual audio control to wind only. Once turning these on, the microphones on the GoPro will sense the gimbal noise and record from another of the 3 mics, completely getting rid of any annoying gimbal noise. So here's a clip which shows what the audio sounds like once these settings have been turned off. So after all that, what are my final thoughts on using a GoPro and gimbal setup while mountain biking? Well, in my opinion, if you plan to record your rides either for yourself, family, or friends, or even to post to YouTube, having the gimbal and GoPro setup is close to, if not the best way to do it. There are most likely better, possibly more expensive options out there, but I think if you can afford to get a gimbal and possibly a cheap used GoPro, even the Hero 4 would be a good option, then this setup is definitely the one to go with. In terms of comfort, I think if you already ride with a backpack, you'll be just fine riding with a chest mount and gimbal. I personally had no issues wearing this while riding, though you will have to get used to looking a bit odd with a big robot arm sticking out of your chest, but let's be realistic, who actually looks good anyways while sweating their ass off and getting mud and dirt all over their face? In conclusion, I think if you have the budget to get a gimbal and GoPro, I definitely recommend you do so, and I'm sure you'll be just as happy with the decision as I've been, so go out and get some awesome footage and have fun while riding. May your rides be as good as this outro is lame, and I'll see you guys.